Hello, and welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. We're a group of Legendarium fans who come together to complain about the main guys and talk about books they won't. I am Hurinfan. You might remember me from the first Green Team episode where I recommended this book, and I am joined by BefuddledPanda,
Hello.
JasnahAsABoy,
Hi.
and making his debut, Spooke.
Hello.
We are covering, I'm sure you know from the tag in this episode and the title, we're doing a Goblin episode. We are doing a Goblin Emperor episode. We will start with general impressions and give the book a personal score and then move to spoilers after a good spoiler warning. That said, this book is not plot heavy at all, and I think anyone could enjoy it even if they know everything about the story. Great. So about the author. Goblin Emperor is the first book from Katherine Addison, but not the first book by the author Sarah Monette. Addison is a pen name. The book has won many awards and was a lot more popular than her previous works, and unfortunately, this will probably be just known as Katherine Addison from now on. Let's start. Did you enjoy The Goblin Emperor? Why, and how would you rate it? Who wants to go first?
I suppose I will, since someone else is.
Okay.
For the most part, I did enjoy Goblin Emperor quite a bit. It wasn't until about part 3 that the book caught me. The earlier parts were a little bit of a slog, unfortunately. I can't say if that was due to the writing style or just me not able to focus at the time. But as soon as I got up to part 3, I was just blown away with how good the book was after that.
Yasta, you want to say something?
Yeah. So, I like the book. I'd probably give it like 4 stars, maybe 5. It was really good. It had me from the beginning, and I was with it the whole way. The only thing that I couldn't wrap my head around was the names, and I just skipped them. So,
Panda, how about you?
Yeah. So this was a reread for me. And the first time I read it, I gave it 5 stars. The second time I read it, I also gave it 5 stars. I still really, really enjoyed it. And there are many, many reasons why that we will get into later.
Yeah, this is also my second time, obviously, since I've previously recommended it. And yeah, the first time I gave it 5 stars, and the second time I would also give it 5 stars, but I found it slightly less enjoyable the first time, but no fault to the book itself. So we've already made a few notes about how maybe difficult the book is. So I have a little game here that I'd like to play with our panelists. And I'm going to take a random word from the glossary, I suppose it's called, and you guys will tell me if it's a person, place, or thing.
And this part will be spoiler free, yeah?
Yeah. I can't think of any other spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Asheveshko.
what?
Can we give that another go, please?
I lost it. No, really, I did lose it. Okay, here it is. Asheveshko.
All right. I'm going with person.
I think it's a person.
Okay.
Person.
You are mostly correct. It's a god. It's a
okay.
Barige, a goddess of the sea. Okay, here's one maybe a little easier. What is a Barige?
Oh, that's it. I mean, I think it's a person, but it's like a group of people.
Like a people. Yeah, like a nation.
Yeah, I'm going with that.
Okay. Do you know what people they are?
It's
Goblins?
the goblin people.
Goblins.
Good. Okay. I thought that one might be a little easier.
I think this game is more of can hear and pronounce the words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's one. Kelvaz.
Kelvaz?
Person, place, or thing.
Person.
I think it's a place.
Place? Jasna?
Thing?
Well, yeah, one of each.
One of us is right.
It is a country bordering the Ethuveraz.
Okay.
So it's a place.
Yes. Give me another one. Okay. Drasharan Parmeno.
I do think that was a person, I think. Like a family.
Josh, can you say that again?
Again.
Drasharan Parmeno.
Wait, what does it end with? The last two letters?
Parmeno. N-O.
N-O. I think it's either a person or a place.
Gotta pick one.
I'll go with person.
Okay, I will go with person.
It's an empress.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do one more. I'm enjoying this.
We're enjoying you.
Never mind. I was trying to find a good thing, but they're all.
Oh, you gotta get one more in there.
Oh, now you guys know what the thing.
Well, I mean, pick a different
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Pick a random one.
Veshaline.
I'm gonna go with person.
I'm going with place.
Person.
It was a group of islands in the sea.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Very nice.
I read the book.
So, this is kind of off note, but how would you? So I said this book isn't plot heavy, and I think we would all agree with that, right?
Agree.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm like 50% there.
I half agree with you. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
why half agree?
So here's the thing. I hear this quite often that like, oh, nothing happens in this book. There's not much action. And well, in the more like common sense of action, I would say yes, it's not filled with like battles and fight scenes or like duels. But there is action, and the action is more about the court intrigue, the interpersonal tension, the like cat and mouse kind of games. And it's more of like battles of wit and words rather than of like sword or might.
Spooke, you want to say something?
Yeah. I would say that even though there's not a whole lot of punching, as a certain cast member would say, that there is plenty in this book. I definitely appreciated going into this book not knowing anything. I think it would be a completely different experience overall if I knew anything that happened in this book, because I went in knowing nothing. It was just a recommendation like, hey, read this. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll read this. And I think if I had known half of the things that happened, I wouldn't have enjoyed myself nearly as much.
Interesting. What do you think, Jasnah?
So, I mean, yeah, like, it's not plot heavy, but there's certainly a plot. I mean, it's about, the inciting incident is the. Oh wait, are we in spoilers yet?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, you're asking me about the plot and we're not in spoilers? Jesus. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the plot was a slow burn and not necessarily always the focus, and it wasn't immediately apparent what direction a lot of the plot was going to go, like, from Act 1. So that's why I say 50% with you on that.
I hear all of you, but I'm going to stick with my words and say that there's very little to no plot in this book, because, well, I agree, and it's not spoilers to say that what happens at the beginning of the book is Maya, the main character, wakes up one day and he finds out his whole family's dead, basically, and he's the fourth in line for the throne, and he becomes the emperor. And then from there on, like Panda said, it's just mostly court intrigue and people talking to each other and backstabbing and normal stuff you'd expect in, I guess, political book from. I lost my words. You guys know what I'm saying, though.
Yes, I understand.
But personally, I just wouldn't consider that plot, because everything was more about Maya and how he responds to all of that. All right. So, what kind of reader would you recommend this book to? Panda, what do you think?
Yeah, so if you are not a fan of grimdark, read this book because this is the opposite of grimdark. But also to anyone who likes fantasy and you're not put off by, the made up words, and you love court politics and character driven stories, as we mentioned, it's not very plot driven, it's very character driven. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy this book.
Yeah, I agree. And the opposite of grimdark is a good way of saying it. It's a bit naive, but
Yeah.
that's part of why I like it so much.
Mhm.
I heard an interview with Katherine Addison, or should I call her Sarah Monette? And she said her old stuff was just kind of cynical, and the stuff she was writing under her real name. And then she had this idea for the story, and she wanted to write a story where uh, a genuinely good person doing the right things has a good ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to read that kind of stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Agreed.
Spooke, what do you think?
Yeah, I generally agree. A fan of fantasy who enjoys reading deep political intrigue. I would also say someone who enjoys reading political intrigue on its own, not necessarily a fan of fantasy. I will say a requirement to be able to enjoy this book is to be able to overlook certain fantasy tropes that do occur, such as the annoying elvish words that show up over and over again. But yeah, off the top of my head, I can think of plenty of people who I think would love this book.
Yeah, I convinced my wife to read it. I don't know when she'll get to it, but I hope she likes it. Jasnah?
Yeah, so some of this might echo what everybody else has said, but if you like stuff that's different from typical fantasy, that's not as like hack and slash, not as doom and gloom, if you don't mind something that's like slow and deceptively calm, I say that because there are times where the calm gets quite upset. If you liked Warbreaker, especially if you liked Warbreaker more than you liked anything else Brandon Sanderson wrote, you'd like this book. If you want to read a bunch of made-up names you can't pronounce that all sound the same, or if you're really, really into bridges, then you should read this book.
Civil engineers.
Yeah,
Sure.
civil
Book
engineers.
bingo. Civil engineer square. So before we go into spoilers, we all enjoyed the book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, 5 stars. So if someone were to ask me to describe this book with spoilers, like to tell the story, I would say a half goblin, half elf man becomes the emperor of an elf kingdom, and he builds a bridge.
Okay, so since we're in spoilers, what I wrote was half goblin with daddy issues who misses his mom, stumbles his way through his sudden ascension to the throne, and gets to build a kick butt bridge.
Yeah, and that's all correct, but the only parts there that were plot relevant were builds a bridge, becomes an emperor, right?
No, that's not true.
No,
Well,
like
He also gets engaged, to be married.
he breaks
And
off an engagement.
He breaks off engagements. He finds out the people behind the murder of his family and also of the attempted assassination of himself.
He also gets kidnapped.
He also gets kidnapped, so there were like 2 failed coups there. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, those things did happen. I admit.
Those are plot. They are
It
plot.
sounds like to me, Hurin just
Maybe
read
they're not
the first
story.
chapter and the last chapter and then called it.
Okay. I maybe my definition of plot and story have mixed. Whatever. Shall we get into questions, or we have any spoilerific comments about my idea that this book is not plot heavy?
I mean, I stand by that. I half agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think everyone
It's
half
not
agrees.
heavy. It is not plot heavy.
I cannot full set agree with you, but yeah.
Yes.
All right. So shall we get into our
There's a
discussion
lot
questions?
of plotting.
There's a lot of
plotting.
plotting. That's yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, let's get into the questions.
Okay, so what did you think of the writing style? Was it engaging? Did any part stand out? Spooke?
Yeah, I wrote quite a bit on this. I will say the writing style was interesting, to say the least. I'm not too sure if I've actually ever read a book quite like this in terms of writing style, just to do with just the political intrigue and the pronoun usage, which kind of caught me off guard a little bit. It took a little bit of time for me to figure out what exactly they were talking about when they were using certain pronouns. Like when Maya kept saying, "Our father, the emperor," to Setharus, I was like, wait, are they like related, like brothers? Because he keeps calling him cousin. And it took a bit longer than I'd like to admit before I realized that. Yeah.
Yasta?
Yeah, that just to piggyback on that, that was I noticed in my last viewing of Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet that the king, Hamlet's uncle father, constantly refers to himself as we this, we that, and I was like, oh, this is like that royal we thing that I keep hearing about. What's that? And then this book was like, oh, you asked what that was? Here's 9 feet in the deep end of that pool. And yeah, so that was really interesting and engaging, and I didn't always follow like what they were differentiating when like people were saying like we plural versus we singular, or this plural versus that kind of stuff, because they're using the same word to do a lot. And speaking of that, there were a hell of a lot of meanings behind the word serenity in this book, and that was really cool, the way they used that one word just to convey so many emotions and tones and all sorts of different like subtext and context to the use of the honorific serenity. It was great.
Yeah, it was nice that we had Maya explaining all of that to us. I guess in this story, Maya is to us as Ksevet is to
Ksevet.
Maya.
Yeah, I would agree.
Panda, what do you think?
Yeah, so I know the pronoun usage got a lot of people just like reading reviews and even some of the discussion on Discord. Um, I I thought that it worked really well. It didn't bog me down or hinder my ability to read and understand what was happening. I did find that the usage of thee, thou, thy being informal was very interesting. Because for us, typically, like I see those words in like King James Bible, and it's more like formal that way. So understanding that it's informal in this context was helpful. And also how Maya shifts between using the and thou and I. And I think I'm not 100% sure if this is correct, but I think what it is that when Maya in his head is like talking to himself as if Setharus was talking to him, he uses the thee and thous. But then when he's talking to himself as himself, he uses I. Um, I would have to like go back and actually reread to specifically see if that is the case. But from my second reading, I think that is what's happening. And the other thing about the writing style is that I found it very engaging and soothing. I think the author makes it seem effortless in her writing. There's a lot of imagery that she puts in there, and she puts in, for me personally, just the right amount of details to describe something. And it's not like the page is bogged down by just like overly describing something.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, and it sounds correct to me because Maya's always thinking about he's been wronged like by Setharus, and nearly everything that's going on in the back of his head is influenced by Setharus and the way that he talked to him. So, yeah, I think that would make sense. By the way, do we all know how you and thee and thou have evolved
I do not know.
What do you mean?
in the English language?
Oh, No.
I could get my brother-in-law, who's like an English professor, in the room, and he
All
might be
right.
able to answer that for me.
So we've all noticed that you, for some reason, uses the plural form of the be verb. Instead of you is, we say you are.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's because originally you was only a plural second person pronoun. But like the royal we, it was used for people of higher standing than you. So you would say you to the queen or the duke or someone. And for every other day, normal interactions, you would say the, like he, she, the, exactly.
Oh, okay.
And that would use, the singular form of verbs. But as classes began to mix and it became less and less noticeable what class somebody is, people just began to start using you for everything because they weren't really sure
Oh,
for whom they should be using it towards. And
Interesting.
then the just became unusable, and we have a terrible second person uh, singular and plural pronoun,
interesting. You know,
which
that
is
that
not.
actually brings up because we're reading this in English, right? I do wonder how this book, when it gets translated into a language where there is a distinction between, the formal you, the plural you, and all of that, the informal you, like, what the readers get. If it's for them, it's just like, oh yeah, it's super straightforward. And it kind of loses a little bit of that mysteriousness that we get from reading it in English. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, I have it in Japanese. Next time I read it, I'll try to check that out.
Okay.
Well, comparatively speaking, I believe English doesn't have a lot of pronouns compared to a lot of other languages.
No, a lot of languages are gender really isn't.
Spooky, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, shall we move on to the next? What do you think of the world building? Was it enough for you? Panda, you want to take this one?
Um, I thought the world building was sufficient enough for me for this book. And kind of spoiling this, uh, there will be a sequel next year, but it's not a direct sequel. And if there hadn't been a sequel, or if there isn't going to be a sequel, I would have been satisfied, I guess, with how much we've seen of the world. Although I there are some parts that I wanted more of. And I think we'll get into it a little bit, which is like because the world was so heavily focused on what Maya can see and experience, we do get it is a bit limited. Um, and we don't see very much of like the barbarians and the other parts of the kingdom. But having said that, I do think that the made up words helped with the world building quite a bit and the atmosphere. So instead of just, saying like, oh, this temple, it's words like, Mich'othasmeire or whatever. And it sounds very Tolkien.
Mm.
Hmm.
I really, really, really like the world building in this book. And yeah, the amount of language usage and just the amount of made up words really, I think, helped with that.
Hmm.
Um, but it more than anything, it felt real to me in the way that I imagined that a medieval court would sound and feel and interact.
Hmm.
It, I, I guess it has it has a certain verisimilitude. Spook, what do you think?
Yeah. So what I would say is that for the world itself, for the like unseen world, we didn't get a whole lot. But I think for the part of the world that we did see, it was built just extremely well. All of the relationships and the various leaders inside the court just done extremely well.
Yasta?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was exactly what it needed to be for the story that was being told. But I will say that the way that we were brought in on information about uh, things that that did add to the world and a little bit to the story, but were a lot like pretty outside of Maya's, ability to directly view. It made the world feel like the way like the barbarian interactions with the Empire were revealed, and they talked about like the source of the conflict being like and the reason why the conflict was so dug in and like sort of in what's the word for it? I can't think of the word. But the fact that it was so like
Entrenched.
yes, entrenched. Being based on like the burial ground, like being like under their fortress, like that being the way that we found out about it, through that like sort of intrigue, dinner conversation between all these different like nobles and bureaucrats, and like and then like kind of peeling the layers of the conflict back at the dinner table, like people discussing politics at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Like it made the world feel like real, and like real in a way where like you might not as the reader get to go to those places, but like just like a lot of people might talk about Brexit at the dinner table, and they're never going to go to London, maybe things. It made it feel like a real place, and that was cool.
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah,
that.
I agree. I think that's a very good example as well, because the political discussions felt real, and especially the way that they felt about them. Because Maya's like, why are we fighting this war? I mean, everybody who started it, who involved, is dead. He's like, well, do you think that we could do that based on this? And well, whatever. So let's move on. Do you have any favorite moments? If so, what were they? Jasna.
Yeah, so the failed coup was definitely the coolest part. I was like shocked. Like it was like getting thrown into a bath of cold water without any warning. Like and the whole time I had been thinking like, if this was a different book, like this guy would have been assassinated like 4 times over. There would be like a coup attempt already by this point by at least these 2 characters who ended up doing the coup. So it's not like I could have predicted it, but there was this like serenity and sort of stagnation to the way the court and the bureaucracy worked, that it kind of just seemed like the emperor could be like relegated to unimportance and nothing but ceremonial importance, and there wouldn't be the need for that kind of a cutthroat coup. And it just seemed like they were kind of shoving him down, and that was going to be all there was. And then all of a sudden, like, he's being kidnapped in his bedroom, and I was like, holy this just got real,
Yeah.
And then I immediately like dialed back like pretty shortly after. But it was a really cool scene. I like that he called for his for the heir to talk to him about it, and like the heir was the one that like called the coup not a coup anymore, which turned out to not matter because the guards were already coming anyway, but whatever. I liked the that kind of undermined it a little, but whatever. I liked the clockmaker's demonstration of the bridge, and I really liked the letter to Maya from the witness for the dead about the like dangerous egalitarian philosophies amongst the workers. It was a little caricaturish. I could definitely tell that they were kind of like picking at like the past of like the workers movement, particularly like in Russia, and like sort of conflating Marxism with Narodnism, which is like terrorism basically. And then one thing that okay, so I guess I should stop, but at some point I might if we get time later, could we talk about the fact that like terrorism led to progress, and that's usually not how terrorist assassinations work in imperial states. It does not lead to progress. Go ahead, but we can talk about that later. I answered the question.
Spooke, what do you got?
All right, so I got a decently long list, but I'm going to go with one of the first scenes in the book where Maya goes to like the public viewing of all the people who died on the airship that weren't royalty. I just felt like that was such a wonderful scene where we saw Maya's heart. We kind of saw a glimpse of who he would end up being as the emperor and the kind of choices he would make. and preceding scenes really showed that he was going to make the statement, I am not my father. I am not going to make the choices the same as my father. I am my own person. And I just thought it's just a really well-made scene and just wonderful to read.
It really sets the tone for the rest that
Mhm.
follows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It establishes Maya's character really well.
Mm-hmm.
agreed.
You know, I think Maya is. We'll talk about it later, but I think Maya is the strongest part of the novel. Panda, favorite scene?
Yeah. So we already touched on this, the dinner party with Lord Pashavar and Marquess Lanthaval, however you say those names.
Sure.
Mhm.
What I really loved about that scene is that we got to see a more depth to characters that are not Maya, and the old buddy like friendship between these two characters at court, that Maya was terrified of Lord Pashavar.
Yeah.
He was very intimidated. He was trying to get out of this dinner. But once he got there, right, there's that awkward silence where, the emperor is supposed to open up the conversation. And he's like, what do I talk to these people about? That's not going to offend anyone. And he starts
Yeah.
talking about a wall hanging, right? And that kind of broke the ice. And then the two courtiers were kind of just opening themselves up and letting him in to their little circle. That was really nice. And all the moments with Adra, Miriam, and Ino, those were so sweet.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed those. And then lastly, there's the Maya's birthday and him coming down to breakfast, and it's like, what is all of this stuff? And they're like, it's for your birthday. And he just doesn't get it. Because to think, like, he never really had a birthday celebration. So that scene was like on many levels very very emotional for me.
I wanted to say on the birthday scene in general reminded me so much of the Christmas scene in the first Harry Potter, where Harry
Oh
goes
yeah.
downstairs and he's like, "Oh, I got presents," because he never had presents before.
Right.
It's
Except like he got a
lovely.
toothpick one year or something.
Yeah,
I think I had
or
a
a
single
sock.
single tissue.
Yeah, just a lovely scene. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, you stole my favorite scene. Well, I shouldn't say that. My favorite scene is every time that he interacts with the children,
Mm.
and
Okay.
I like how he interacts with his nephew and his nieces, and how sweet they are, and how sweet he is to them. And yeah, it just kind of warms my heart. But if I can't pick that one, I forgot her name, but the woman who was dying and she was nice to him at his mother's funeral.
I wrote down her
Uh,
name. Her name is Osmiran Danavaran.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I like how that little kindness that she showed him impacted him so, and I think that's
Mhm.
also very influential to him
Mm-hmm.
personally and how he interacts with other people. That dinner scene, that was where he made the joke, right? Where I think one of the courtiers were you saying something nearly treasonous, and he's like, how could you say that in front of the emperor?"
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I could change my mind." He's like,
Yeah.
he said, I might not do anything, but I could always change my mind. And then they just bust out
Silence.
laughing. I
Yeah.
really
And then
like, yeah, it was a long silence, and then they started laughing.
Yeah.
It was very
Like
tense.
the inner monologue was like, "Oh, I should not have said that."
yeah. I one thing I just thought of this because we're recording this right after Christmas. Um, the all the kindness that we see in this book, it made me think of Klaus and the
Mm,
the
mhm.
the quote, right? A true act of goodwill always sparks another. And I would like to think that, with the woman at the funeral and Maya's mother, like their act of goodwill really helped him be able to pass it on to others.
Agreed.
The next one I want to answer first. Who is your favorite character? And Maya, I mean, Maya is one of my favorite characters in anything I've ever read, and it's a breath of fresh air. And how he responds to everything. I mean, he's human. He has parts where he lashes out and he gets angry, and he does the wrong thing, and he's easily deceived, and he's constantly thinking about the way that his uncle or his cousin treated him, and how he's been scarred by that, and the way that his family treated him. But he doesn't respond with the hatred that he really deservedly could, and instead he responds to kindness. And yeah, so I love Maya. Spooke, who's your favorite character? And
Yeah. Maya is definitely up there for me. I really also enjoyed Civet. I thought he was a wonderful character. And someone like, while they said, hey, you're emperor, you can't have friends, I definitely saw that relationship form into a friendship. Same with his guardsman. I know at the end of the book, he's like, hey, just, I've never had friends before. So technically speaking, we aren't friends, but we're something. And I just really, yeah, he did. I just enjoyed all of those characters that kind of guided Maya to the right choices and influenced him in a good way.
Yeah, I like Civet a lot too. Panda?
Kaseva is one of my favorites as well. The two of them, they make a really good duo, and for I relate to Kaseva more than I do to Maya, because I'm more of the like behind the scenes kind of person, less of the face of whatever it is kind of person. And also Kaseva reminded me of 3 Seagrass from A Memory Called Empire, but personally I like Kaseva better. And a couple others, like Spooke mentioned, the guardsman, particularly Beshalar, where he's super gruff, but he's actually kind of like a teddy bear underneath it all. His outbursts later in the book, they just made me laugh. And the Great Avar, so the Goblin Emperor, not the Goblin Emperor, but the Goblin King from who's Maya's
grandfather?
Grandfather, yeah.
Grandfather.
I would say the audiobook version of him is really, really good.
Jasnah.
I pretty much had all the same answers that Panda did. I mean, she had more, but it's like Maya and Sevet and his grandfather, whose name I couldn't remember because no one has a name in this book for me.
I'm with you.
What did you like about the grandfather?
He just seemed like fun. He was blunt. He was he didn't put up with the bullshit that Maya couldn't have time to like learn how to be a person, and like was like, no, you're gonna learn how to ride a horse. I'm gonna leave people here to make sure you're all right, and I don't know, he liked to party. He was fun. He's a fun guy. I mean, obviously it sucks he like didn't ever talk to Maya's mother after he married her off, but I feel like he was trying to atone for it.
Yeah,
it's a lot in a very little amount of screen time. I got all that and more.
Yeah, I was gonna say I loved that she showed that like this dude wasn't a great dude, but he has grown as a character after Maya's mother died, and he has tried to atone for his mistakes. He's acknowledging his bastard children, and I was like, damn, just loved it.
And then he makes. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say that now that you're putting it that way, it kind of also gives you like a what if Maya's father had like gone a different route with his approach to power and politics and family and relationships and stuff. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think I've kind of lost what I was going to say.
Damn it.
No, it's fine.
How'd you guys like Kelahar, the witness for the dead?
Loved him.
Yeah, he was awesome.
Such a great character.
He is going to be the main character for the sequel, And the sequel, like I said, is not a direct sequel. So the sequel is called Witness for the Dead. And it's really interesting because he got to go off and do other things, and all we get is like the letter, right, that summarizes what
Other
he
books
did.
should be about what he did, right?
I actually don't know. I haven't really looked into like
No,
the
what I mean is like if somebody else wrote the book, like a normal fantasy adventure story would be his story.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
Or you'd
Yeah.
cut away. You'd cut away from the Empire, and you'd have like 7 chapters of his story.
Right.
A Sanderson interlude, basically.
Yeah, you mean like a small novel?
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, like Killahar is a character that has a tragic backstory, and like we get enough to feel for him, and it's like enough, but I look forward to reading more from his perspective.
I have a feeling Kip would not like his character much.
Oh yeah, why is that?
Kip hates Bury Your Gaze, and he's kind of the product of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if listeners don't know, he is kind of like a cop, I guess you could say. He's a cop, and at the same time he's a
judge.
Yeah.
Well, he's a mage, so he's like the spiritual detective, I guess.
Yeah, and so he could like see the last moments of somebody's life, and
yeah, he's like Dresden, basically.
And he has to.
He's a priest that can talk to the dead people and do investigations.
Yeah, he's a priest as well.
Yeah.
His former lover died, or he didn't. Well, he died, but it was because he prosecuted him for the death, for the murder of his former lover's wife, and it was a tragic backstory, and I liked it. But yeah, it kind of does have that trope. Tangent over. Do you think the protagonist's lack of agency helped or hurt the book?
And there's the follow-up question.
Yeah, why do you think the author chose to write the protagonist with a relative lack of agency? Yasmin, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I just think that was like awesome commentary on a political figurehead in a state with persistent patterns of self-replication of the system, like denying the character a lot of agency, like kind of like really highlighted, and him not knowing like how to even go about being the head of state, but like kind of the machinery of state just continuously grinding along anyway, like kind of like brought out like the concept of being a figurehead in a state where like the ruts of the wheels of the state machinery are like very well worn, and it kind of replicates itself, and they're just like, we need you to be here and do it, but you're not really, your actions aren't that important, you don't have a lot of choices, you just like need to be here because it's part of these patterns.
So you see it more of as a political commentary?
Yeah, I thought that's what I think.
Spooke, what do you think?
I thought his lack of agency was completely just well warranted. So I think it definitely helped the book because we see Maya throughout the book grow, starting off as someone who, first of all, didn't even want this seat of power. He was just thrown into it all of a sudden. And we see him grow and adapt. And I believe later on in his life, that agency may end up showing up. Unknown, really. But I think the lack of agency just helped propel the book.
I agree, but I think he shows, agency and growth in that as the book goes on and as he learns how to handle the court and interact with people. And I mean, like he got the bridge built. That's what the book's about, right?
Yeah.
Right,
oh, sorry, Justin.
In such an ossified system, getting the bridge built is a big deal. I mean, have you ever tried to get a government that does not want to do things to do a thing? It sucks. There's a lot of meetings with people that do not want you to talk. It's not a fun time, and I speak from experience.
And they actually address that in the book too. Whatever that goblin word is about, tying up a prisoner and then like the tide is rising up, and
Oh yeah,
as
I
a
remember that.
metaphor of yeah. Anyway, I'm not doing a good job of
It's
explaining
called.
Yeah.
Yes, that. I actually, so I appreciate these questions because it's kind of like there's not much that happens plot wise in this book, and I don't quite agree. Um, I think that the quote unquote lack of agency helped the book quite a bit. I felt like I was experiencing things with Maya, and it's kind of also why I like Murderbot so much, because we're in the main character's head a lot, and I find what they have in their heads very interesting and engaging. I think to Yasna's point that the lack of agency was very realistic, and it showed the intricacies of the role of an emperor, and what it's likely to be like. Um, More so that it also shows that Maya was not a dictator or a tyrant. Because if he wanted to, he totally could have tried to play that role. And then, honestly, I think he would have been killed off much sooner if he had tried. I think the he kind of may have given a show of lack of agency as well, to kind of as a survival tactic. But he relied on his counsel when he needed. Um, but at the same time, he was also able to stand up to them. And more so, that happens later in the book. Back to what Huron was saying, how he did show agency later on, and he was able to forge his own path for his rule. I think the other thing is that I do relate to Maya in that he had to demonstrate his rule via influence. Um, and then lastly, I think the lack of agency was also a way to show the world and not have it be too info dumpy. Like the information that we gain is what Maya gains through conversations and experience.
Great answer. Okay, so what do you think of the pacing of the book? Spooke, you first.
I think the pacing was extremely well done. I thought the transitions within chapters between like different scenes kind of tripped me up a little bit. But yeah, overall, I think the book was well paced. Everything that pushed the story forward was done well, and we got to see the bridge built. So,
Panda, what do you think?
So I really like the pacing. For a book, quote unquote, where not much happens. The pacing was actually pretty quick. It's not like super fast, but it is fairly quick. The mystery of the wisdom of Chihiro was a nice driver in the background. But really, like Maya, because Maya's like day to day was just like meet with this person, gotta take care of this thing, gotta resolve. So it keeps the book moving. Um, and I didn't find myself bored. And also, for my reread, I was listening to the audiobook, which was like listening to a BBC radio drama.
Great. Oh, Yasna?
Yeah, the pacing was really well executed. At times it lulled you into thinking that everything was like steady right before like a big plunge. I dug it. It was slow paced, but not like where you're like, oh god, this is so slow. It brought you were like soaking it all in, and like, and when you got too comfortable with how slow it was like, just kidding, and things got faster real quick. It was good. I liked it.
Personally, as someone who says this book has no plot, I loved the pacing, because for me, the book isn't about the story. The book is about Maya and how he interacts with the people around him, and I loved literally every interaction that he had, and I loved being into his mind. So the pacing is perfect. I couldn't put the book down the first time.
Hmm.
We've done a few of these other questions. So, what surprised you most about the book, Yasna?
Um, that Maya didn't get deposed or brutally subjugated by the court and the bureaucracy like immediately. I mean, yeah, I've read too much grimdark and too much heroic fantasy where like big climactic things happen. So I was like on the edge of my seat, like waiting for the other shoe to drop for a few minutes before I realized it wasn't that kind of a book. Uh, the coup was the biggest surprise, like I said, in a tub full of cold water, and I was waiting to bring this up till a question that it seems like you skipped. So I just kind of wanted to say, like, for all the fact that that everybody's like, oh, nothing happens, there's no plot. When everybody was talking about their favorite scenes, like they were all different, and everything that you guys brought up, all the scenes you brought up, I was like, oh my god, that was also my favorite scene. Like, you know, there sure as hell were a lot of really good scenes for a book in which quote unquote nothing happens. So I'll stop.
Nothing
there.
happens. Most surprising for me, let's say my expectations for the book, because I had no idea what to expect, and I heard Goblin Emperor, and I'm just like, okay, I've just seen it recommended. I'll read basically anything anybody recommends to me, and so what
You should read
was
50 Shades of Grey.
within reason.
Yeah. 50 Shades
And
Darker.
it also kind
Go
of
ahead.
depends on how, whatever. Yeah. And I could talk about how I choose to read. I think I have actually. We've done an episode on that. But what's surprising for me is how much I enjoyed it, because I've never read a book like this, and it makes me want to read more books like this.
Mhm.
In the plot, I don't think I was really surprised anything. I was expecting a coup. Everything made sense to me. He needs to get married. No. What surprised me is how he stays true to himself the whole book, despite having so many challenges in his life.
Mm,
Yeah, me too.
nice.
Spooke?
Yeah, when I first started reading this book, I had, like Hurin, I had no expectations going in. I pieced together that the book was about a goblin and an emperor, and that was it. So a lot of the things that happened did surprise me because, again, I have never read a book quite like this. I've read Warbreaker, and there is some amount of political intrigue in Warbreaker, but really this was the first book I read like it. I was surprised by the first coup. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're going to do something like this. But then I was surprised by the second coup even more. A lot of this book surprised me.
Right before the second coup and the Duke died, right? He received a present. Sorry, this is a total tangent. That blinds the people that make it, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
are blinded if you use it.
It's not if you use it, it's the people that make it because of how intricate the designs are.
I believe he said that if you look at it, like even if you own it, then
No, I think it was
No.
oh,
it was
okay.
just the lace, I guess that's what it was. The lace is like so white, and the designs are so intricate that people go blind making it. Yeah.
And it was like an obscene amount of that gift, so like a lot of people went
Yeah,
blind
a
to
full
make it.
set. He was like a full set.
The parasol would be a grand enough gift, but the whole thing is
Yeah.
something
Was
on
that from the guy who attempted the second coup? Is that why you
Yeah,
brought
that was the
up?
guy who
Yeah.
who killed him. Yeah,
Their
or who
family.
who tried to kill him.
Okay, that's a nice little touch.
And Kasevit was like, "Yeah, I don't think the meaning is opaque." Yeah, I don't think so. I said, Panda, you.
Yes. What was the question?
Right, I
What-
was hoping
what was
you remember.
surprising?
That's why I said you.
What surprised me?
Yeah, well, it surprised you.
Yeah, so I think I echo what a lot of you said. Like when I first read the book, it was like 6 years ago, I think. And it was super hyped at the time, based on like the people that I was getting reviews and recommendations from. And so I was actually surprised that it didn't disappoint me, being how hyped it was. Um, and upon rereading it, and I was surprised that to be honest, I have been putting off rereading this book because I was afraid that it wouldn't be as good the second time I read it because I enjoyed it. I remember enjoying it so much the first time. And I was surprised that it did not disappoint upon rereading, and I still enjoyed it. Probably actually even more than the first time.
Yeah, so I said at the beginning of the episode that it was 5 stars the first time because I loved it. I mean, it was instantly one of my favorites. And this time I said it was still 5 stars, even though I enjoyed it less. And I think oh, it was only because I had never read something before like this that
Mm.
it was slightly less the second time. But what I did enjoy the second time was understanding a lot more of what was happening.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a lot of subtleties in their interactions and references to things that happened early that you probably don't notice the first time. It's not a lot. It's not like I don't know Gene Wolfe or Malazan, but it's there, and
Mhm.
it's yeah, I liked it. How do you feel about how Maya handled his situations? Spooky, you want to take this?
Yeah. So I respect Maya, and I respect his decisions quite a bit. Uh, for somebody who got thrown onto his throne at 18 years old, after being hidden away in some remote area, raised by somebody who hated him, abused him, not knowing anything about the court life, his decisions were just great. I don't know. I don't think there are many people alive who could go through that much and end up how Maya ended up. Uh, for example, at his father's funeral, he wore the proper mourning attire whenever he was at the funeral and whatnot. But the day after, he switched into only wearing dark colored gemstones, and I appreciated seeing that because he didn't want to cheapen the death of his father. He didn't want to insult the death of his father or insult the people who were mourning. He didn't want to make a show of it simply because it would have been proper for him to do. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. He wanted to show, hey, my feelings are completely different from yours. I respect your feelings, but they're going to be different. And I just respected that a lot of him.
Yasna, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there was an underlying sort of principle that kind of guided a lot of his more conscious decisions, at least. I mean, not that he didn't like slip up and act out of more sort of base, instinctual, emotional, reflexive stuff, but in terms of his conscious actions, it seemed like he was motivated a lot by like kindness and by compassion.
Hmm.
uh, and you could, and right now I'm also reading the main book I'm reading right now is Malazan Book of the Fallen, or the main 10-book series that I'm reading right now, and compassion like figures heavily in that one as well, the importance of compassion. So that really stuck out to me reading this because I'm reading them side by side with each other, and uh, and it was interesting to me that uh, you know he continues to act out of like compassion and kindness, and at certain points even like patriotism, because like when the coup happens and he kind of like is like, well, if I thought that things would be better if I was out of the picture, I might just
Yeah.
go with the coup, but he knows it won't be. And I think he would have accepted like whatever the heir had done when the heir
He
came in
said
the
he
room.
expected to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And like early on in the book, kindness and compassion are rewarded with like incredulity and astonishment and rudeness and you know um, attempts to take the throne from him, uh, and then as the book kind of goes on, the longer term refund for his compassion and kindness, to use a crude market term for what shouldn't be described that way, is he he begins to see like people appreciating his kindness, appreciating his compassion. uh he starts to build the kind of intimate relationships he's capable of building with the people around him. He starts to have allies, and you know, and there could very easily have been the kind of novel that I love to read, where he starts out trying to react with kindness and compassion, and he's initially punished for it, and then he'd like,
Lash out.
you know, backs off, you know, and goes and kind of conforms to the reality around him. And you know, in real life, I feel like some of the kindness and compassion that he shows would probably have to be beaten out of him if he's like trying to do like big political stuff, like greater good stuff. Not all of it, but you know, I feel like he probably should have mercilessly crushed his enemies maybe a little bit more if this were real. But like, I appreciate the moral message, especially like when I'm reading stuff that either falls into like, you know, grimdark, or like it's heroic but they're still crushing their enemies, or like Malazan's basically a like tragedy. So, or at least so far, that's my read on it, is it's like tragic. So having it be more just upbeat the whole way, and like him kind of sticking to that, you know, he did the best he could for the situation he was in, and I've gone on far too long.
No, those are excellent points, and I'd like to say that I think what you said about how as time went on, people begin to respond better to that, and I think that's kind of a message on the nature of power, right? When people in charge uh, respond a certain way, maybe those under him are fall into the same influence. You can't change everybody, but like because he responded well, the people like Chavar was a bad guy, and he was pulled out of power because of what happened. And I don't remember the names, but the heir's mother, she was a bad lady, and she's gone, so she's no longer about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spanda.
I liked how it all worked out. He doesn't have magical powers, right? Like he's not like, ooh, look
He
at
tried.
me. He did try, but it didn't. He just doesn't have the knack for it. But his upbringing, his good upbringing from his mother, and the hard upbringing from Sethrus, I think those were his powers. Even though Sethrus treated him very, very poorly, he learned a lot from Sethrus, and in his monologues, like in his head, you can see how much influence Sethrus had. Um, and then in particular, you know, he learned from Sethrus to look at things from a cynical point of view, but that was then balanced out by the kindness and compassion that he received himself, mainly from his mother, but also from the woman at the funeral. So he was able to see the negative points, but chose to act in the positive way. And I think that's probably the key point about the character, is that yes, he is naive, but he's not really that stupid. He can see from the different perspectives, yet he still chose to act the way that he does. So he's insightful, he's analytical. I really love the moments where those elements were able to shine, such as like when he was arbitrating the dispute between those three groups of people about the river and the land, and like they've been squabbling for decades, and he's like, you know what? No matter what I do, people are going to be pissed off. So I'm not even going to try to please them. I'm just going to look at this objectively, right? And it's like a very Solomon moment, King Solomon moment, which I really appreciated. Um, and also like how he just decided to cancel all the marriage negotiations for Vedro.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was boss, and he showed agency in that situation. Um, and I think part of it is also that his kindness and compassion, it's not meaningless. It is meaningful, and we see that, as you guys have said, that it really does help him build those relationships and gain allies.
Well, good stuff. I think we're gonna wrap up. Does anybody have any closing thoughts or things that I missed you want to add?
I think there was one thing that Yasna, you had bookmarked about the terrorism leading to progress.
Oh yeah, so this totally like vindicates like assassinating emperors and czars, and like historically, like what that leads to is like they crack down on all the lower classes and like the laws get like really strict and tight, and like a bunch of people get shot who maybe had nothing to do with assassinating the person. Like it doesn't go well. It's not a path to progress in real life.
So I have a little point about that, because I was reading an interview with Sarah Monette, and I don't know if this is exactly what she meant to address your point, but she did say that she was thinking of the French Revolution when she was writing this. And she was thinking of, is there a different way to get from a bad government to a good government without all the bloodshed, without that revolution? And so this was kind of her way of exploring that possibility in a fantasy world.
Interesting.
But still, the agent for the progressive change ultimately is the Narodnik that blows up the airship, because
Yes.
because Maya is the more progressive emperor. That's why I said, that the terrorism led to.
Yeah,
Personally, I
and
do believe
he
it's
acknowledges
possible to
that.
have a peaceful. I do believe it is possible to have a peaceful transformation, but not necessarily in a stagnant imperial system like the one in the book, but like in our system today. But maybe.
Maybe. I did have a couple of things, which is like specific books to recommend. So yes, you mentioned Warbreaker as one of them. I think, and Kieran, you've read The Curse of Chalion.
Yeah.
I think that people who enjoy that book would enjoy The Goblin Emperor as well,
I
and
agree.
vice versa. There's a lot of similarities there. I've also heard the Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers has similar elements in terms of like kindness being a big part of the characterizations, which
That
I
makes me
plan
want to
on
read it
reading.
more.
Yeah, I want to read it in 2021. And then lastly, so Kieran and Yasna, because you two have read Malazan, how does this book compare? Because you kind of touched on it, Yasna, about the compassion and the kindness, but in terms of like, if people like the Goblin Emperor, do you think they would also like Malazan?
They're not. The only thing that
Go ahead.
the only similarities I think is the theme of compassion is important. Other than that, I think they're very, 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 very different. So if somebody said I like the Goblin Emperor, I would not say, oh, you should read Malazan.
Well, I guess
Right. Definitely would not. I mean, there are like shared themes. Like there is political intrigue in Malazan, but there's also like giant magical battles with like explosions and stuff, and like undead dinosaurs with swords for arms, like attacking people.
And hundreds
it's just not.
of characters.
Yeah,
Okay.
hundreds of characters. It's like night and day
There's
in a lot of
action.
ways.
There's things that happen.
There's punching.
Yes, there's a lot of punching. Yeah. Now there are at least 2, if not 3 people on this call right now that that like both, but I wouldn't go, oh, because one then the other. Yeah. But I do want to add, you mentioned final thoughts. When we were talking about how hard it was to, get a bridge built in a government that doesn't want to do things, it reminded me of for people you would recommend this book to if you really like parks and recreation, and you really identify with the objective of building a park in a government that doesn't want to build parks. This book works for that.
Well, all right then. So I think we all gave it a ringing endorsement, or at least a
Absolutely.
endorsement.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been the Legendarium Green Team. If you disagree or agree, please come to the Discord. If you're a fan of the Legendarium, please join Patreon if you can. There's a subreddit, and Panda handles the Twitter. Thank you to our hosts, and thank you for listening. And finally, thank you, Horizon, for starting this. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Did you freeze?
He doesn't know.
Kieran.
Uh-oh.
I think he here and
Our host is gone.
what do we do? Do we just go on with the show?
Is black an improvement to freezing? Does that mean he's like
I think it's
trying
trying to reconnect.
Yeah, he's just completely frozen for me, but like I just see his face.
He says, "I can see and hear all of you." It's reconnecting. I think we'll just give it a sec. He may need to try to reconnect.
Oh no.
He'll come back.
I believe in you here in France.